What I say is the true curriculum is what you get kicked out for. You can say you have other kinds of curriculum, and that's kind of true, but if you're not kicking them out for it, then it's not the real curriculum. My way of thinking about curriculum is that it's not about activities. It's about what do you need to do, and if you don't do it, you'll get kicked out. Because that's your true curriculum. You're saying, here's the thing we will not compromise on, because if you don't do this, we're going to get rid of you. We cannot have you in our environment if you're not willing to do this. And in democratics, in the real Sudbury style democratic schools, like the ones that are really free, they're saying the thing you have to participate in is conflict resolution. I knew one of my students was someone who got kicked out of a Sudbury school because he wouldn't participate in resolving conflicts. And it's like, well, if you can't resolve a conflict, like we can't have you here. And that totally makes sense. Welcome. And
Hello.
this is the self-determination theory Q&A.
Maybe we can do it different because I'm
Sure.
working with a school now, a very
Mm-hmm.
small one. They have about 17 children and they really start up.
Mm-hmm.
And also with teachers who coming from regular schools.
Mm.
And it's not, they didn't choose for democratic education, but they choose for following the child and want to give them autonomy,
Mm-hmm.
but I
Mm-hmm.
really don't know exactly how to do this with the boundaries and then putting
Mm.
limits again. And so
Right.
it's a really, really interesting, interesting situation because
Right.
they're also on very different levels. And so I thought, yeah, maybe it's a question like, what's your experiences or background? Like, how to help these people to get it
Mm-hmm.
easily done, and what's the really important things they have to do
Right.
so that
Right.
they arrive there.
So tell me a little bit about the way the school operates. Like, is it sort of having a curriculum and doing stuff, or is it more play-based, or what's the how does the school actually operate such that they're working for it? Like, what are they doing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're still trying to figure out,
Mm,
but they have two groups with ages. They're from 4 to 12, I think.
mm-hmm,
Uh, and they are divided into groups, the younger ones and the older ones.
mm,
And actually, the work, I don't know if the real curriculum, but with uh, in the groups, so they call it like focus time,
mm-hmm,
and then they have programs and they work on yeah, and I think they work a little a bit with curriculum, with like the mathematics and the
mm,
writing, but also a lot of arts. And you can do, so they leave that a bit open, what
mm-hmm,
you want to do, but you have to do it there, you in
mm-hmm,
the classroom. And they have also like working with circles.
mm-hmm,
Uh, and they have this curriculum, this schedule, like when they're in the classroom and when they are outside.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's no free that they can choose if they play or
Right, right.
work, but
Mm-hmm,
it's not really mandatory. So if they say they need something else, then they would adjust.
mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
they offer a quite how do you say? They offer a schedule.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Okay.
it's actually they try to do it because then it's more calm. So they are a
Right.
bit afraid of the chaos
Yeah,
and
yeah.
of the playing and there's a lot of because this just last year there was a split in the community, like you have with
Mm,
they are now for 3 4 years,
mm,
and so there was the split like that they would want to have the school, and others were more like into homeschooling and doing it differently. So, and now that's done. So they're
mm,
really going
mm,
for the school. Uh, and actually, they just read the book from Rebecca Wild. Rebecca
Hmm.
Maurice Wild.
Do you know the title?
Yeah, the German one.
Right.
Uh, yeah, because it's not free to learn, but it's a bit this kind of title.
Yeah, okay.
Uh, but they work also with self-determination, and so
Mm-hmm.
they want to go there,
Mm-hmm.
but they're also a bit afraid of letting go, and
Yeah.
they still want to bring the children to like to use their creation power, they call it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, but actually, I guess they are also afraid of just letting them play because then all these emotional,
Right, right.
social things happening. And
Yeah, that's
so, but
messier.
so I try to find a way so they keep this, they can do their thing, but keep it open so it can evolve to more. That's what's my position in there, and just to bring them a bit on the same page. And one
Mm-hmm.
of the
Mm-hmm.
teachers actually, she's really getting it now, and she's
Mm-hmm.
really trying.
Right.
And now we try to get the others not to get in her way.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
so that's a bit the situation now.
Yeah. So it
So
sounds like you're on the right track as far as um so there's no problem with schedules and having a structured time because um structure is necessary in order to support autonomy and to support the needs. So that's one of the things that a lot of people sort of mistakenly think is that autonomy and structure are the opposites. Like if you provide structure, you're diminishing autonomy, and that's not true. The question is not to have structure or not, because unstructured is not possible. Unstructured people are dead. Okay. So you have to have structure. The question is what kind of structure? And this is where schools vary, is what a democratic school, what the most committed democratic schools are doing is saying, we're going to structure the social stuff. We're not going to structure the academic stuff. And so it sounds like what you're doing is sort of in between that because you're not saying we're going to strictly structure the academic stuff. We're saying we're going to make some suggestions. We're going to offer some, we're going to have a time schedule. We're going to have in time periods and outside periods or whatever. You're structuring things in a certain way, but you're also saying, hey, this is a conversation. We've got ideas, and if it's not working for you, let us know. So what that does is it enables you to say, we have something to offer, and that it gives everybody some order to time and space and say, okay, this is things we're doing now. You have to focus on something. We aren't going to control what you're focused on. We're going to make suggestions and we're going to try and get people enthusiastic about something. But we're also going to be flexible enough to say, hey, if that's not working, we're going to do something else. So that right there means that you're prioritizing the relationship over the controlling the environment. Um, because that's kind of what you give up um, when you say it's going to be completely play-based and free. You're saying, well, I have to then manage relationships because we have to resolve conflicts, or it's complete bedlam. It's completely, chaotic. So you have to have a way, and that's what I think. So my way of thinking about curriculum is that it's not about activities. It's about what do you need to do, and if you don't do it, you'll get kicked out. Because that's your true curriculum. You're saying, here's the thing we will not compromise on, because if you don't do this, we're going to get rid of you. We cannot have you in our environment if you're not willing to do this. And in democratics, in the real Sudbury style democratic schools, like the ones that are really free, they're saying the thing you have to participate in is conflict resolution. I knew one of my students was someone who got kicked out of a Sudbury school because he wouldn't participate in resolving conflicts. And it's like, well, if you can't resolve a conflict, like we can't have you here. And that totally makes sense. You have to have that some kind of structure. And what I say is the true curriculum is what you get kicked out for. You can say you have other kinds of curriculum, and that's kind of true. But if you're not kicking them out for it, then it's not the real curriculum. Um, so your direction there is to say, okay, our obligation is as adults in this space is to ensure the kids' needs are being met. And they have the need for autonomy. So that's why I'm saying structure and autonomy go together. And so the structure you're providing is a great way to structure time and space and the relationships. But then you're also saying we're going to flex with it, and if it's not working, we're going to change it. So that's the thing that's really differentiates you from some other kinds of schools that may say, no, this is what we do. We have some Waldorf schools here in the U.S. that I had a young friend. I wasn't actually teaching at the time, but I was had a young friend who was going to a Waldorf school, and he was 8 or 9 years old, and he said, "I want to learn how to read." And the response at his Waldorf school was, "We don't teach that here. Like you're not old enough yet for us to teach you to read." And that blew me away. That was like, what? It didn't occur to me. It seems so bizarre to me that if a kid is asking for something and then you don't provide it, like that seemed just utterly absurd to me. But then I realized, like, oh, okay, this was many, many years ago. Um, and I hadn't, I wasn't fully attuned to SDT, for instance. And so it didn't occur to me like, oh, okay. Now, that was my intuitive reaction was around that, still attuned then to the agency of kids. Um, pardon me. So I was attuned to like, hey, he's asking for it. Why wouldn't an educator, provide some support for that? But that particular interpretation of Waldorf was, oh, we only do these things. We knit and we play recorders and we, those things, the things they do. Um, I forget what the other famous things they do for, but anyway, um, so they teach certain things, and they're not very flexible about those things, which doesn't mean it's a bad environment for kids. It all depends on how it's being run. Like I would never pass judgment on that school because I never experienced it directly myself, and I didn't have enough information about it to make any sort of judgment. But that was a surprising response to a child's request for literal instruction. Um, so looking at your environment, it's like one is be clear on what the kids need. So that's one of the core of self-determination theory is we have, the three primary needs, relatedness, autonomy, and competence. The other thing to know about those needs is that they're satisfied as a perception, not as a circumstance in the environment. So it's how they perceive it that matters, that meets the need. So when you're doing something that you think is autonomy supportive, giving them a certain choice or, being flexible in a certain way, that's nice, but you don't know if it's actually satisfying the need until you check in with them. Now, given the ages that you're checking, you have, you are probably not going to be checking in with them directly and saying, how's your autonomy need being, satisfied? Like, that's not how it works. With them, you can be more attuned to their emotional states, their how they're behaving. Are they getting along with others? Are they kind of on track? Um, just in social terms. You don't have to be particularly concerned about whether they're objectively meeting some criteria. That's not relevant. You just need to be tuning in and having enough of a relationship with them so that you know what is normal and what can we expect, and then are they deviating from that? You don't need to be totally formal about it. It'd be nice if you were, but you don't have to be, um, because at that age, they're not going to be able to self-report how things are going in a direct way. So you're going to have to do informal evaluation. You're going to have to use your things. So that's where your teachers um, need to be sort of starting to tune themselves into what really is autonomy, competence, and relatedness. What those are truly, important fact. I actually you should include sleep in there too. Though
Yes.
hopefully they're getting that need met at home, but that's actually
Hmm.
something relevant. So you should be attending that and you know letting them sleep if they need to. um, Hopefully not. But starting to attune them into what are the needs, how do they look for young children, So there are some resources that I can send along to you. Um, Sort of like one of the things I have is that there are specific teacher behaviors that have been studied. Now, a lot of them may not be relevant to your situation because of the flexibility that you have. So, you know, um, like punishment probably isn't a thing. There's actually, there's a variety of things that have been studied, and they're on my list because they've been studied. Um, but things like making sure you're showing unconditional positive regard, like that should be a really, you need to be really clear that who they are is what you care about, and if they misbehave, then you focus, you need to communicate that they're okay, but we need to examine this behavior, and figure out what to do about it. That's your conflict resolution processes. So how does your do you have like a particular conflict resolution process or way that you handle conflicts?
Not yet.
Mm,
It's uh, they're still experimenting with it, but it's like they have these conversations and they really tend to the conflict, maybe a bit
mm,
too too much even.
mm,
Like that, also small things get bigger.
right.
Uh, but they're really going into the conversation and trying to find out what's happening and what's the needs of what the needs of others. But they're also still afraid of the conflict.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they don't really know. And because there's still a lot going on with the parents
Mm,
and is in the school. Yeah, you
right.
have the young children, they played out, so you see also this dynamics in the
Hmm.
school. And so I think that's a good thing that you say that we really have to work what kind of structure do we need or for the conflict
Right. Right.
resolution, really making decisions about it. How do we do that? So, and one thing is I guess what I told them, maybe that's is that they really have to learn it as the adults at the
Hmm.
school team do it themselves, like
Right.
modeling what they want the children to do.
Hmm.
And I guess and I think they all want to, so there's a lot of willingness there.
Right. That's good.
Yeah, they're open to it. Also a bit scared. It's only women, so we try to
Ah,
find a man to come in.
yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know if it would work because they're really like, ooh,
Yeah. Yeah.
don't. They really like the quietness and the peace and
Hmm. Hmm.
so.
Yeah.
But
So,
it's
so I
still
would
fine.
suggest that you capitalize on the willingness,
Mm-hmm.
and and you know it doesn't matter which conflict resolution process you use, but that you use something, and
Mm-hmm.
that you ideally would kind of use it, practice it, learn it as adults with adults,
Mm-hmm.
so that you're all on the same page. So yes, you'll use it with the kids too, but you'll be a lot stronger as a staff if you're able to model it and use it in your own way, in your own lives. Um, so how many of your staff are also parents of students in the school?
There's one person, but she's not working with the children anymore. So it's more in the
Ah,
organization, but she's
okay.
still in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
and but so I think no, not anymore in the
Okay.
school directly.
And how many
Working
staff do
with
you
the
have?
children. Uh, there are now four.
Okay.
Four people, then divided in the ones who do the school thing and
Yeah. Yeah.
the after school thing.
Oh, okay.
So
Nice.
it's a bit and then we go to the forest, and so there's a lot of play and openness and
Nice. Nice.
So, but
So
then
so
there's a course that it's like, okay, but then the children say, but we want to play, or we don't want to play, or we need the
mm,
structure. So it's going this back and forth thing. And
yeah.
that's also a question I have because there are few children who used to do this way of working and using their autonomy.
Hmm.
And then there are always new children
Yeah.
coming from regular settings or and parents not used to it yet. So it's
Right.
that's another other thing. So
Yep. Yep.
I try to address too. But like that you have these different levels of competence
Yeah.
actually in using your autonomy.
Yep.
And my experience is like when I was at a democratic school, we were growing much too fast. So the children who would do it got
Mm.
really overwhelmed and also fed up. And they said, we're
Mm.
not doing it anymore because nobody understands what we are doing.
Yeah.
And so you get this deschooling process is going. So how have you any idea or advice, recommendation, structures, like how you can address these different levels of autonomy without.
Well, I think the main thing is the conflict resolution process. That's the main tool for handling that. Because
Yeah.
largely what you're looking at in a deschooling process is they're kind of have a set of expectations that were generated in a very different environment. And then they're planted in this other environment. And so they're going to sort of um, emit behaviors chaotically to discover how this environment works. Because they don't know coming in, because it's not familiar to them. And so they're going to try things. And some of the things they're going to try are going to be very unsuccessful because they generate conflict, or they mainly because they generate conflict. If they don't generate conflict, then nobody's really caring about it. So that's what, or the other part of deschooling can be that they get so depressed they're not doing anything. Um, in which case, the conflict resolution isn't the issue. It's just making sure that they feel seen and heard as a person. That's, do they feel like they belong here? Um, and so that's the other kind of, you either have the I'm going to experiment with acting a lot, acting, that in English it's usually just acting out, um, or which means they're emitting sort of, they're doing, trying things because they don't know what else to do, and they may be trying things that may be good ideas, but then they don't know how to skillfully coordinate, communicate, do the things they need to do to make that actually work with others. So that's where, for those kids, the conflict resolution is the crucial thing, because that's where they're going to bump up against other people and the boundaries that you're setting in your environment. And so having a really clear, teachable process for conflict resolution is a really good idea. So one of the interviews I did a couple of years ago for the podcast I do was with Michael in at the Whole Life Learning Center in Texas, Austin, Texas. And one of the things they have, I believe it was him, is that they have like a four-step conflict resolution process that they literally have it painted on their playground so that the kids, once they know it, they can go and step in the first one and do the process for that. And then they go to literally the next step, which has some sort of illustration of it on the ground. And so they can literally step through the process. And so that was a way for them to externalize the process that they had chosen. And I believe theirs was based on um, NVC, nonviolent communication, which has a new name now, which hasn't stuck with me. But having a process, yeah, having a process that you can literally teach and have it be really clear, and like something you can create visual aids for, because then that also helps your
Hmm.
adults say, oh, what's the process? Just like the kids are going to be like, well, what are we supposed to do? And then you can walk through the process. So finding something, and it's particularly helpful to have something that's visually compelling for small children, and giving them some external way of reminding them what this process is. So it's there's a thing called universal design for learning, and this is the thing is the people who need to learn it the most are helped by these visual aids, but then it actually helps everyone be better at the process because they're clear
Yeah,
about what the
yeah,
steps are.
yeah,
So so that's one of the things. So for the kids who are acting out, having clear conflict resolution and steps you can do and ways to be able to teach even those new kids, here's how this process works. And then, it takes them a while to get used to it, but when it's externally clear, then it's good.
and could you say conflict resolution? What about decision making? Is it the same thing, or is conflict resolution
Those are
more
two different
important?
things. Yeah. So
Yeah,
it the question is what decisions are you making together such that the kind of decision making process you need. Those are two very different things. Um,
hmm.
Decision making creates conflicts that need to be resolved in your conflict resolution process. And so you should have conflict resolutions are more important than collective decision making because you need that
Yeah,
strong ability to resolve conflicts before you start generating
yeah,
them through decision making. That's my 2 cents on that. So collective decision making is
yeah,
important too because everyone needs to perceive it as something that's fair. If it's not fair,
yeah,
people are going to stop participating. So it is those are both important features, and I would say those are the core features of all democratic schools, is both the conflict resolution and the decision making. True, there's sort of this rhetorical thing that the collective decision making is really important, but I think that's just not really understanding how important the conflict resolution is. It's actually more
yeah,
important.
precisely. Yeah,
You can have an autocratic decision making process that you can tell the kids what to do if you have a really strong resolution process where they can say, when they finally say no, then you have to resolve that conflict. And if you don't have a good, solid process to resolve that conflict, then you're stuck because then it just becomes a power yeah, fight, power over, and it becomes a problem. But if you have strong conflict resolution, it doesn't matter what decision making process you choose. You can then resolve the conflicts that arise from it, and conflicts inevitably arise from making decisions because as long as you're in a group, um,
yeah,
because somebody wasn't didn't want to make the decision or didn't agree with the decision or whatever. So one of the things I emphasize is when you look at decision making, decide how to decide. So this is something that has, especially when you have young children, it has to start with the adults somewhat and say, how are we making decisions? And are we doing it democratic, or is there a director? Is there somebody who's in charge and they get to make decisions? Um, that's a legitimate thing that can happen, but everyone has to be on board with whatever it is. And then you communicate that with kids as well. Here's how we make decisions. Here's how we're going to make decisions together. And if there's a problem, we go to conflict resolution. Um, and there's many different ways to make a decision. Like I said, you could have a complete consensus where everybody literally has to agree. And there's some decisions for which that's really, really good and important. But there's other decisions that should be, maybe someone should be appointed to make the decision. And because it's not important to everyone else, that this is just someone has to decide, let that person do the deciding and then, go from there. So it can go either way. But being mindful that the ultimate goal is a fair decision process. Fair doesn't decide who should make the decision or how it should be made. It's just that everyone should perceive it a certain way. Once again, this is all about autonomy, especially, but autonomy, competence, and relatedness is if somebody's making decisions, they're not taking other people into account, that's going to alienate them. That's going to, start diminishing their needs for relatedness. Or if people are feeling left out of the decision, like their autonomy is being compromised, then once again, you're running into the problem of need support, and you're generating conflicts. So that's why conflict resolution is the most important part,
yeah,
because
yeah,
everything boils back to it. Everything comes back to can you resolve the conflict? And if your habit is avoiding conflict, that's a problem too, because that's just pushing it down the road. It's just saying we're gonna keep pushing it to the sides until it exerts itself into the center of everything, because that eventually happens if you're not resolving things. So It's a yeah. So that's it all comes back to a combination of resolve conflicts, satisfy needs. Um, because and figuring out how to ensure that everyone's needs get satisfied. Um, because if inherently, if you make a decision where somebody's needs get sacrificed to meet somebody else's need, you're just continuously generating conflict there. So the question is, how do you align those things? How do you align the conflict resolution? How do you align everybody's needs so that you're not generating as many conflicts? And when you generate conflicts, how are you resolving them so they don't just keep being kicked down the road or becoming bigger or whatever? And that's why the dual focus, to me, the most central things are needs and conflict resolution because that's how you generate conflict. And so from a staff point of view, you should be having sort of those meta conversations. So not just what is our conflict and how to resolve it, but what are the underlying dynamics of human beings, because we're all those, that actually generate this and looking at the needs. And these aren't the only needs in the world. So one thing before we or get timed out, which I have 4 minutes left, um, is there's actually different kinds of needs. So primary needs is what we focus on in self-determination theory in the literatures, those three primary needs. But there's also secondary, derivative, and uh, particular needs. So primary needs, autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Good. Secondary needs, the one uh, really clearly identified secondary need is beneficence. So beneficence is secondary because when you satisfy the need for it, you get more well-being. But when you thwart the need, nothing happens. That's why it's secondary. Primary needs, if you thwart the need, you get less well-being. That's what makes it primary, is it's harmful to thwart the need. But when you thwart the need for beneficence, no effect. But you get more well-being if you satisfy it. So it's good to have, but not missed when it's gone. The other kind is derivative needs. And the one derivative need that's clearly established in the scientific literature is meaningfulness. So at the time they were proposing meaningfulness as a primary human need, and they studied it after they studied beneficence. And so when they controlled for autonomy, competence, relatedness, and beneficence, when they look at the well-being that results, there's nothing left in the variance for meaningfulness to explain. So what that means is meaningful is still, you could consider it a need, but it's derived from all the other needs, all the primary and secondary needs. And then the other kind of need is particular. Now this one's a little different because the autonomy, competence, relatedness, beneficence, and even meaningfulness are universal. Particular needs are those needs like if I were to walk out into the street and get hit by a car and put in the hospital and have to be on life support, I have particular needs because I've been physically injured. And my constellation of needs at that point includes these ones that are not going to be needs that you have. So particular needs are all those needs that they exist, they're there, but they're not universal. So there are more needs than just what SDT talks about, but they're different kinds. They're derivative. They're different. Okay, we're almost going to get cut off.